Do you carry too much stuff in your four-wheel drive, or maybe not enough? Stick around and we're gonna go through what spares I carry in this car. I'm just about to pack the car for our Easter trip that's coming up. So I thought it was a good opportunity to go through my drawers in the back and check out all my spares and all my tools that I carry and do somewhat of a stock take and see if I need to get rid of anything or add anything for this upcoming trip. And also, because of where we're going, I've got a few extra spares that I can throw in as well that I don't usually carry. So we'll whip open the back and we'll go through it. Before we get into it, I'll give you a little tour around the back of the car, and then we'll get into unpacking this drawer and finding out what goodies I've got in there. And while we're here and packing, I might even show you how the back of the car packs with the swags and everything else that goes in here. Before we get into it, drop in the comments some of the spares that you carry in your car. You know, they might be car specific. I know if I owned like a dual cab or, you know, like a D-Max or a Ranger or something, and I was full driving in that, 100% I'd be carrying CVs and tie rod ends. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what you guys carry in your car. Anything that you think might be handy that I can throw in the back here, or things that you might think might be a bit of an overkill. I'm keen to hear it, so drop it in the comments. So it's pretty basic in the back here. It's just a Super Center drawer. I did cut it in half, so I did used to have a double drawer in there with the double wings. I just found that things didn't really pack that well, and this whole drawer was taken up by stuff that could fit elsewhere. So, you know, it's a lot of room that the drawer takes up for not much stuff that I would put in there. And also one day I had a problem with my fuel pump and I couldn't actually get to it because the whole drawer system was in here and I was way out in the bush. So yeah, as soon as I got home, I pulled the drawers out, I cut them down to one, and then now I've just cut a little flap there. So now I can get access to my fuel pump straight away. And if you watched the dyno video the other week of this thing, you would have seen that that came in very handy. So we had the fuel pump out on the dyno and it took like 3 minutes to get it out. So that's super handy. This is like a split tank. So you can see there are two different tanks welded together. So this back tank is just straight water, which is accessed by this little tap next to the back seat. And then this comes out the door. So I usually put it in the slider there, you know, washing your hands, or you can drink it, but generally it's just for like washing up or yeah, anything like that. And then the front tank is actually the water meth tank. So there's a pump that's mounted on the front there, and that feeds, like a line feeds up into the intake, and it's all controlled under the dash there. It's got a module that links to the Haltech and that. So from memory, this back tank is like 35 litres, I think, around that. It's around 35, and then the front one is about 17. So it is a decent sized tank. I generally don't have to carry a water jerry can. It's enough for a weekend trip or like a 3-dayer where, you know, that's plenty of water. I don't have to really carry like a jerry can with water in it. But if I'm going for a week or, you know, 8 days or 9 days like this next trip, I'll probably still throw one in. And this big square area here is good. I'll show you soon when we pack the back. So I've got a camping box that fits in there, and the cooker and everything all fits in here pretty nicely. So for starters, we'll open this drawer, find out what's in there. So what I'll do is I'll just unpack everything. I'm doing this for a reason, because I actually need to know what's in here. So I'll unpack it all, we'll go through it on the bench, and then I'll throw it all back in. This might actually get me in trouble. The wife's probably going to be wondering where her Tupperware containers have gone. And that's not even all of it. So I've still got this little wing. I'll pull this off and unpack all the stuff in here as well. Now that it's all out on the bench, it seems kind of ridiculous that I carry this much stuff pretty much all the time. Like 99% of the time, you probably won't even use any of this stuff, but the times that you do need it, you know, it'll come in super handy. But I did unpack some stuff that probably doesn't need to be in there anymore, or even at all. So that's good. And some of that stuff's, you know, like there's a tow bar in there. There's 4 D shackles for some reason, even though I've got one on the back and one on the front already. So that seems kind of excessive. But I'll go through what's in the drawer and then we'll go through what was in the side wing. So let's get into it. So this is the last thing that I pulled out. So this will be the first thing to go back in. I've never used this, but one day when I do, I'll be glad that it's in there. I mean, it weighs, I don't know, probably 4 kilos, I guess. This is what it is. So I'll get it out of this rag. It's a whole front hub assembly. This does seem kind of excessive, but there has been times in my life where this would have been really handy. Probably not in the last 4 years, but nonetheless, you know, one day when it does come in handy, it will be handy. I carry hubs anyway, so I just thought I can just bolt it to this whole hub assembly. That way, if somebody does a wheel bearing, because let's face it, patrol wheel bearings aren't the best, but you know, I've kept up the maintenance lately and I haven't had a problem in probably 10 years, but I have been with people that have collapsed wheel bearings and it's been a bit of a saga. So, you know, having this should make it quick and easy. If you collapse a wheel bearing, you know, you destroy the stub axle. I know this is, I can't remember what side this is. I do have to drill it out so it goes on both sides. That's one of the jobs I actually have to do. So at least when the day comes when somebody does collapse a wheel bearing, you know, it's just as simple as unbolting their stub axle and everything, and then bolting all this on and it's ready to go. It's got fresh bearings in there with fresh grease. Everything's like in good condition, but I've even like, got studs and nuts, and then the whole hub assembly with the inner drive gear, the circlip, the egg rings, you know, all the stuff there. So even, you know, you break a hub or something, I've got stuff there. It's got a strengthener ring on it already with bolts, you know, it's all just packaged up, ready to go. And really, for the weight, you know, it's probably, 3 or 4 kilos. It's not that big of a deal, which is why it just tucks all the way up the end away in a spot where if I need it, it's tucked in there nicely. The thought actually did cross my mind when I made this rear bar and the swing away. The thought crossed my mind to mount that whole stub axle and bearing hub and everything on the spare wheel carrier, but it'd be a little bit of stuffing around, you know, to make sure everything seals up properly, because obviously it'd sit on there for ages. You don't want dust or anything or water in there, so it would be a bit of stuffing around to make sure that it seals up properly. And then the worst bit is someone else collapses a wheel bearing and then you have to use it, then your spare wheel's kind of stuck because you can't bolt the other hub back on without a wheel bearing. So that's also a downside. I mean, you could throw the spare on the roof, but I don't know, I just keep it in there. It's way easier. So this is the Old Faithful tire plug kit. Everyone should have one of these. I haven't used this in a long time actually, but you know, it's the same thing. When you do need it, they come in bloody handy. And I was talking to one of my mates the other day actually, and he sent me a video and he had 42 of these tire plugs in a sidewall to keep it going for a trip. So it was like a massive cut, 42 plugs in it, and it held air. I think in the video he had it at like, I don't know, 38 or 40 PSI or something. So, you know, you never know, they might come in handy. It's just a basic kit. I keep, you know, that all comes with it. But I also threw in, like I used to have a couple of these, but I think I pinched them all. So just a few spare valves, and I haven't really needed them because I have a couple of these in each car now. So if you haven't heard of these are actually called Colby valves, and you know who sells these? Roadrunner Off-Road. And what they do is they actually come in from the outside. So if you rip a valve off, you slip this valve in, you do this nut up here, and it expands this rubber gasket plug here, expands it out and seals it in the rim, and then you're on your way again. So literally you rip a valve off, you know, the longest part of ripping the valve off is probably digging this thing out and finding these in here. And it's only a matter of even a shifter would do it, drop them in there, nip them up with a shifter, and then you're right to go. I think I've only ripped a valve off you know, 2 or 3 times in my life. But the last time this happened was in the race car. It was a video a couple of years ago now. And after that weekend is when I went and bought 4 of these. So I've got 2 of each style. So this style is a wing nut style and the other style's got a nut on it. So I've got 2 of each, and then I've got 1 of each in this car and then 1 of each in the race car. And it was that weekend that I ripped the valve out that I just went and bought some, because where we had to put the spare on was an absolute pain. So this would have saved us like half an hour and we would have been like literally back on the tracks in a couple of minutes without having to stuff around and change a tyre. So yeah, I've only test fitted these like just to see how they work. Like they're cheap enough just to keep in your car for a rainy day, because chances are where you rip a valve off is never a good place. You're always buried in a rut somewhere, or you know, somewhere where it just would be painful to put a spare on. It's good to know these just live in the back of the car. So this little box is actually a brake line flaring kit. There's a bit of a story behind this one, and I should actually get some bits to go in here. I've been meaning to. But the story is, like a big group of ours went to Tassie in 2019. We went there for like a boys trip in the middle of winter, and the aim was to do all the hard stuff that we could find. We did all the iconic stuff, you know, that you see. We actually did the proper $1,000 track, not the one that you usually see on people's videos, but the main big loop, which I think they call Wombat over there. So on the first day, we got off the boat, we got some fuel, did some shopping, and then we went straight into the $1,000 track. And it was only probably like a quarter of the way in, and there was a big hill, and it had these somewhat deep ruts in it, and they were just filled with little logs. And what ended up happening was I drove up this hill, got to the top, and had a stick stuck under the car, no big deal. Got under and had a look, and it had wedged near the upper control arms and actually wedged onto the top of the fuel tank. It actually come up that far that it punched the floor up here and bent this plate up. That's how far up it was. But it was wedged up there like ridiculously hard. So I couldn't get a chainsaw in there. 2 of us couldn't pull it out. You know, it was wedged up in there. So anyway, turns out it was a mistake, but I ran the winch through a snatch block and then back under the car, and I was super easy on the winch. I had my foot on the brake and I was just tapping the winch in just slowly, and it sort of loaded the winch up, and then it freed the log, and then my brake pedal went to the floor. And on further inspection, it had ripped 2 of the 3 lines out of the proportion valve in the back, which was an absolute pain, like first day in, first couple hours in. So I had to crimp over the brake lines, and then I only had front brakes. And if you've been in that side of the track, there's a couple big uphills in there, and it was super wet. And some of the uphills, you know, I didn't make it up, and then sailing backwards down the hill, you know, with only front brakes was super sketchy. You know, I had to use a lot of handbrake. There was a lot of dumping the clutch to stop the car. Like, it got pretty wild. But we made it to the hut that night, and then the next day we drove out the shorter side, $1,000, or the one that you always see people do. And then we camped at the very end because we had other problems. And then a mate of the group, a Tassie local, he had to bring parts for another car. So he actually went and bought this brake flaring kit. And then while the other car was getting fixed, I had to re-flare the brake lines and sort of bend them into shape and screw them back onto the proportion valve, so I had brakes again. And it's been in my car ever since. I actually forgot about it. I forgot it was in there. So it's good to know that that's in there, because what I've been meaning to do is buy some spare brake line and some fittings and that, so I can actually repair, you know, if it's broken in the middle or, you know, whatever, I can just do some sort of repairs. Because I was lucky where mine broke, it broke right at the proportion valve. So literally I just slipped the nut back on, re-flared it, you know, so I got super lucky there. But if it had broken the line in half, yeah, I would have been in all sorts of trouble. So here we have a spare tree trunk. I think I actually won this from a race years ago from memory. I actually don't know. So just a spare 3 meter tree trunk. As you can see, it never been used. And I think this is actually a snatch strap. Oh no, it's actually a winch extension strap. So also never been used, but you know, just one of them things, you never know when it's going to come in handy. So I just keep that in the back. Got this random pencil case, probably from school. I don't even really know. I just got a couple random. She's got a heap of BMX tools in it from when I rode BMX. That probably doesn't really need to be in there, so that can stay out. So this is a spare fuel pump. Actually, I don't run this fuel pump anymore because we swapped it out on the dyno. So anyway, this would probably still get me out of trouble, but I really need to swap this out for another one. So I run this one in the race car, so this won't be bad to keep in the race car, but I need to go and get another one for this car. And with the fuel pump, I carry a spare fuel filter. So, you know, you get a bad batch of fuel or water in the tank or whatever, this will come in handy. These are tie rod ends. You can see in there, so there's a left and a right hand thread one, so I can do either side in case one breaks. I've never actually had a problem, but you know, these are a showstopper. If you break one of these, which I actually have seen before, you know, break the pin out of the end, you know, yeah, if this happens out in the middle of nowhere, it's a full-on showstopper. So it's just good to keep a couple of them. They don't take up much room. Now onto the main set of tools in the back. If you don't have one of these and you do like a lot of remote traveling or just traveling in general or hard driving, you know, this Bahco toolkit, I don't know, I reckon it's the best bang for buck one you can get. So it's got 1/4 inch drive stuff, 1/4 inch deep, and then it's got 1/4 inch drive with, you know, flathead, Phillips head, Allen key all the way up to 10 mil. Couple extensions, you know, screwdriver bit, 1/2 inch stuff, all the way from 14 to 34. And then it's also got impact sockets, 17, 19, 21, 24. And then we flip this little lid here, and it's got these two-way little socket things and then a spanner set as well. You could probably condense this down a little bit into like a canvas bag or whatever, but it's just nice to keep it all tidy. Hopefully the wife doesn't watch this because I did steal some of her Tupperware container for this one. This is what I keep all like spare nuts and bolts in. So these are all smaller size. There's hose clamps in there, you know, just a heap of Nissan bolts. I nearly know where they're all from. There is a coolant temp sensor in there, that's pretty handy to have. There's a hose joiner, vacuum hose joiner. I've got some airline fittings, you know, in case I break any or whatever. So just a heap of little random stuff in that one. And then in this one I keep some bigger stuff. So there's actually some more wheel studs, I think they're rear, and wheel nuts. And then I've just got a heap of bigger bolts, Panhard washers. That's actually a shock washer. That's a Panhard washer. You know, just a heap of bigger bolts, brake caliper bolts. There's some radius arm bolts in there, control arm bolts. Just a heap of random bigger bolts. There's just a bit of random stuff. So a packet of zip ties, pretty long ones, bunch of tire wire. I just threw in a new roll of duct tape, 2 sticks of metal putty, you never know, fuel tank or radiator or something. Chainsaw tool. I thought the file was in there, but I don't know where the file is. We've got a little first aid kit. It's honestly probably not ideal. I probably need to get a bigger one, but you know, something's better than nothing. I've got a wheel brace that I just hacked up when I was like 18. So it does like 19 and 21. So keep that in there. A couple other little random things. So this is like a GU wheel bearing socket. You never know. If you did a wheel bearing, you need to take the nut off. You know, just may as well throw one of them in. There's a little hand saw here. Might come in handy, you never know. I wish I had this at New Year's when with Jesse Gleason and we went over that massive log. You know, I could have cut it with this thing. If you've read the comments on Instagram, you know what I'm talking about. So this is actually something I need to organise better, but this is all like a bit of electrical stuff. So it's just got like fuses and crimps and what else have I got in here? There's some factory Nissan relays. You know, there's a few of them. There's some wiring in there, some heat shrink. There's actually that's an air brake solenoid for the winch. Some more factory relays. Fuse for the compressor. Just a heap of little random stuff. So I really need to like get a box or something for that. And I've got to throw in like some solder and a little soldering iron. But that should be enough to get you out of any trouble. Here I've got brake fluid, which come in handy, and then power steering fluid. I'll make sure I duct tape the lids because you don't want the lids blowing off in your drawers and filling your drawer, especially with brake fluid. Like, that would be no good spilling, but neither of them would be good. Here's a nice fresh rope shackle and snatch ring. This come from the guys at Road Safe. Big thanks to them for sorting that out. Yeah, rope shackle and an alloy snatch ring is just so much better to use than one of them old school snatch blocks. Take up less room and way less, so you know, it's just good to shove somewhere. And if you watched like one of my race prep videos last year, we went for a test drive and my box lid blew open and I lost a rope shackle and snatch ring. So I was pretty annoyed about that, but now I've got a nice replacement, so that'll go in the back here as well. Pair of gloves to go with it. And then lastly, I've got these 2 canvas bags that a friend made up for me. So this one just got like spanners and that in it, a couple random like screwdrivers, and you know, there's vice grips and pliers I think in there, a couple shifters, a couple of custom spanners to get to some certain parts. And this one just has like ratchet straps. It's got some gloves in there. It's got a packet of tent pegs just in case, you know, for the awning, or in case I need them. Some sand pegs, you never know. So just a couple random little bits. Oh, I've got more shackles in here. How many shackles does one car need? And that's it for the drawer. Actually repacking it, it's repacked better. So I've actually gained a little bit of space. I could shove some more stuff in there, but I'll try and keep it as tight as possible so things don't smash around in there. So the tighter it's packed, the better. But yeah, I just need to chase up a little box or something, or bag for these electrical stuff, and then everything fits in there pretty nicely. So there's not too much in this little side wing, but we'll go through it anyway. So for starters in here, this is just a factory clutch line from the hard line, like that's the little block there, from the hard line down to the slave cylinder. In this rag here, I've got the flexi lines from the caliper to the hard lines. So there's a front and then there's a rear in there as well, in case they get ripped off. I've got a full set of belts in there. So that's aircon, power steering, and then the 2 alternator belts. A little selection of heater hoses. I do actually have to replace one in here because this is like to the firewall heater box, and then there's one next to it that comes out of it. So that actually burst one day and I had a brand new one hidden in the back. So that was super lucky. I actually need to get another one. So I think little heater hoses are always handy to keep in your car. I've got a top radiator hose, and then the bottom one is under here. So that'll keep you out of trouble. So this was, it'd still work now, I think. That's a turbo oil feed, and then that's an oil drain. So if I ever had a problem with lines, I can fit them. I've also been wanting to do it for ages, but I wanted to make a flat plate that bolts onto the exhaust housing of the turbo. So you can pull the whole core out, the compressor housing. In the back here, I've got all the fittings for the block that, like for the water and oil, so I can blank them off. And just so like if you're in the middle of nowhere and you know something happens to the turbo or something goes through the turbo, you just never know. You know, you could just pull the core out of it, bolt the plate onto the exhaust housing. You could blank off the bits in the block, and then you can just drive it NA. So, you know, maybe keep a little pod filter in the car. You know, you can put on the end of the intercooler piping, and then it will drive NA, no worries. I haven't done it yet, but you know, if I go super remote, that's probably something that I'll just stash in the back here. Like really, it's only a bit of, you know, a bit of 3, 4, 5 mil plate with a couple holes in it, and I've already got the fitting, so it's not that big of a deal. So I've got an assortment of vacuum hose, mainly 6 mil, but there is some smaller stuff in there, but most of the car is 6 mil. I've got some proper fuel injection, like fuel hose. Then there's some varying sizes of heater hose in there as well, enough to sort of, you know, get you out of trouble. And then I've also got some airline. So that's all mainly 6 mil airline. I do carry like air hose joiners and a couple other things in the, I think they're in the center console. And then I carry a fuse box as well in the glove box. But I have just noticed that I don't have any 5mm airline. So ARB, well, now it's different. Now they supply 6mm airline, but for years, like forever, ARB has always supplied their own airline, which is blue, and it's 5mm. It's a real weird size. You can't just go down to the fitting shop and get like 5mm airline. You know, you can get the Imperial size. I can't remember the sizing, but it's like either just under or just over 5mm, and it's like gets you by, but the hose joiners are real tight in that. But the front locker is actually 5mm airline. So I think I do have some of the Imperial, I can't actually remember what size they are, hose joiners, but I don't have any 5mm airline. So that's something I should probably roll up and throw in the back. And this bit of airline here, I think it's 3/8. This feeds from the ARB compressor down to the air tank. So, you know, if the one there ever burst, I've got some spare line there that will keep me going with air. So this is the stuff I don't really need. That's just a tow bar, but I can't remember the last time I towed with this. I've always got this thing in here with a shackle on it all the time. It's just so much easier if you have to, you know, hook onto something or someone has to hook onto you. It's just there ready to go. So this doesn't need to be carted around in the car. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shackles, 6 shackles, and then I've got one on the front bar. So I've got 7 shackles on the car, plus the rope shackle. That's definitely unnecessary. I don't know how I ended up with so many shackles, but this is half the reason I'm doing this. But keep in mind, like a couple of these are a little bit bigger size shackles, and they don't fit through them little tie down points on the front of your GQ chassis. Not that you should be using them, you know, to pull off or anything, but sometimes they come in handy. So I do have a couple smaller ones that I will throw 1 or 2 back in the car. I might throw one big one and one small one back in the car. Shackles like this are still handy if you're dragging wood around. You know, sometimes we carry a drag chain, you know, steel shackle, or, you know, you just never know. So I'll throw a couple of these back in, but the rest can stay out. And then lucky last, 1 litre bottle of engine oil, even though I think it was diff oil, but yeah, a litre of engine oil just in case. I do carry a couple little things in the glove box, so I've got a heap of paper maps just in case. Yeah, there's a fuse box, I've got a headlamp, spare radiator cap, there's a multimeter in here, a torch, little bandage, and then in here there's some more random stuff. I've got some matches in case we have to start a fire, like a lighter as well, just in case, little lamp, some phone charger stuff. You know, just a heap of little random stuff, and tire deflator and that is in there as well, and a beanie and some gloves. There's also 3 fire extinguishers, so 1 here, 1 under the passenger seat, and 1 under the driver's seat. I think fire extinguishers are an absolute must-have. Like, if you're driving around with no fire extinguisher, I get worried. The first thing I did to this car when I bought it, like, I washed it, and then when it was ready to go for roadworthy, I threw a fire extinguisher in the car. You just never know, because, you know, in regards to this thing, yeah, if it burns to the ground, insurance will cover some of it, but insurance will never cover what this car is worth to me, the time invested, and even the money in parts and all that. Like, insurance would never even come close. So fire extinguishers are a must. Like, I'm honestly trying to find a spot to put a 4th one, because you just never know. All right, well, that's all packed up nicely. I've saved a little bit of room, so at least if I think of anything else or I need to put something else in there, I can. But here's a couple of things that I'm taking on this trip that I don't usually take. So in here, I've got a power steering pump, a starter motor, and I forgot this was in there, but this is a steering uni. It's an 80 series one, but if something happens to the factory rubber Nissan one, I can just put that uni on, worst case scenario. I've got a short side CV. Now this is a 300M RCV. This is the one that I broke the inner axle on the race car, and I got a replacement inner axle, and that's still the 300M bell. So I'll just throw that in, takes up next to no room. And then we've got a alternator. So that's actually very important when, you know, the whole car relies on that alternator. So the 12 and the 24 volt system rely on like a single alternator. So if you happen to have problems with it, you know, there's just all sorts of dramas going to happen. Even though it is like a brand new alternator, you just never know what can happen. So no harm in throwing one in. And also, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure these, like the TB 4245 alternators, I think they fit the TD 42s, the ones without the vac pump on the alternator, the ones with the vac pump on the motor, but I can't really be sure. So another thing it's important to carry in an alternator is if mud gets in, you know, the one that's on there and locks it up, then I've got no water pump either, because the water pump and the alternator run off the same belt, which happened in Tassie last time. So in 2019, the same trip, right towards the end of the trip, it was actually Barry from Roadrunner, his white ute that's now got a 6 litre in it, I think, or 6.2. That had a TD42 in it, and we're pulling out of this campground, and then all of a sudden the alternator locked solid. So it was lucky. I don't know if we actually used that alternator or somebody else had one, but we had to change the alternator because, yeah, we're not moving anywhere with the locked up alternator. So really that stuff takes up like not that much room. So it's good just to throw it in here, and you just got peace of mind if something happens that, you know, you've got some spares with you. I've also chucked in some cleaner and a bunch of rags, and I'm also going to throw in like a tarp, so if we have to work on our cars, you know, we can roll the tarp out underneath, and that saves you getting muddy and wet. So all right, now that that's all packed up, now I've actually got to pack the car, but I've been talking way too long, just absolute rubbish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack the car, and then I'll just show you at the end. So I'll just show you how the stuff fits in there. Right, and the car's pretty much, it's about 90% packed. So I just got clothes bag to do. I've got 20 litres of water to put in, and I think, yeah, that's pretty much it. Couple little things. So, I've got to pack the fridge. That's tomorrow's job. Ideally, it'd be 10 times easier to pack if I finish my jerry can holder. So I think I started that like, I don't know, over a year, probably nearly 2 years ago, when I built all this, the rear bar and the sliders, and I put the red winch on the front. I started building the jerry can holder, but I just haven't had time to finish it. Well, I've been a bit slack, I suppose. So I've got 2 jerry cans in the car, which is a fuel and a water, which you can see here. That's the water, and then that's chainsaw fuel. But then I've got a 20 litre one there just in case. It'd be a heck of a lot easier if them 2 jerry cans were just on the back of the car. I'll try and pack as tight as possible, so then I don't have to tie anything in. Otherwise, things just fly around in the back here. So I've got 2 chairs, 2 stretchers in here. There's a table under there, like a fold-out table. 2 swags, big gas cooker. I just run the little 500 gram bottles. I've got a couple in there. So these are the boxes. So this one's just full of cutlery, plates, fry pan, all that sort of stuff. And this one's got, you know, like tin foil, paper towel, salts and peppers, sugar, fire lighters, soap, oil, all that sort of stuff's in this bottom one. I started making a box to replace them, so I'm going to make 2 of them, and they fit perfectly in here, and I'm going to somehow tie them down, so because these rattle around a bit. But I think having these boxes is like the best thing ever, because the idea is you go on a camping trip, you come back, and then you restock the boxes, you know, with anything that you use, and then the boxes sit on the shelf and they're ready to go for next time. So next time you go camping, you just pull the boxes off the shelf, 5-minute check over, throw them in the car. That way you're not chasing up bowls and plates and, you know, all your cooker and all that sort of crap. So that does make life easy. But yeah, I've got the CV tucked in there. I've only bought my little chainsaw this time because where we're going is relatively popular. So I don't really think there'll be any big trees down. So the little one will be fine for firewood. And then I've got the other spares, the alternator, the power steering pump and the starter motor just tucked in there. And then the clothes bags will just get thrown on the seat here. And I've got a little bit of room here to throw something as well. Ideally, I'd like the emu wing things, but yeah, they're just a bit out of the price range. So maybe one day. Got to make sure I've got the bin bag on the back. These are actually Trasharoo free plug here. Pretty sure they're Australian made, and they can fit on up to a 40-inch tyre. This is tucked up. If I unclip this, they're a massive bin bag. Like, there is so much room in them. They're actually sick. So before we went to Tassie in 2019, like 5 of us bought these, and they're all still going strong. So if you are looking for a good bin bag, yeah, I think from like a 31 to a 40-inch tire they fit. Definitely worth checking them out. So that's it. I'll do a quick water and oil check just before we leave, make sure that's all good. But the car's pretty much as ready as it can be. I didn't really have any jobs left on the list that I needed to do. So hopefully it's all good. Hope you enjoyed this one, even though it was just me talking absolute rubbish, but that's like most of my videos. So gives you a bit of an insight on what I carry in the car. At least some of you might get some ideas, or throw them in the comments. Maybe I can get some more ideas of what to do. Stay tuned. Hopefully the idea is when this comes out the following week is our first episode of the Easter trip, but I'll see how I'm going for time. I should have it out, so make sure you stay tuned for that, because that is actually, it's going to be a sick trip. Fingers crossed it all goes good and we have no car problems. So keep an eye out, and until then, we'll see you on the next one.